What is going on, guys, and welcome to Bootstrap tutorial. And this video we're going to talk about nav bars in the Bootstrap. Now, the most basic way how to create a nav bar in the Bootstrap, and let me just collapse over here this head so we have a little bit more space. So again, back to nav bars. Over here we're going to create a nav, and here we will have to give it a class of nav bar over here, and then nav bar default, right? This is going to be our most basic nav bar. And over here, I'm going to create a unordered list. All right. And I'm going to say that this unordered list is going to have a class of nav. And then it's also going to have nav and nav bar nav. So this is going to be the two classes that unordered list we're going to have. And within that list, we're going to place a list items that all have anchor tags. Let's say I'm just going to create 3 for now. Right. So let's just press tab. And you can see what happens, right? That I have right now 3 list items. I'm just going to give it a hashtag over here. And over here, I'm going to say that this is going to be, I don't know, link, right? All of them the same because it just serves our purpose to show you how they look like. Now you see what over here, what happens is that they're obviously collapsed right now because of the fact that this is a smaller screen, right? So if we make it bigger, see, this is our nav bar, right? But this being Bootstrap, and Bootstrap being Bootstrap, there's obviously more classes that we can add. And first of all, what they suggest doing is actually over here creating a div and saying that this div is going to be a container fluid. So I'm going to give it a class and I'm going to say container fluid over here like this. And obviously what I would need to do over here, actually cut this div and actually paste it over here, right? Because we want to place it within the whole div, because then it actually, they're saying it's going to be displaying better. And after that, what we want to do is actually create a div, and we would want to say the div that would have a class of navbar header. So over here, I'm just going to say navbar, and this is going to be header. And within that div, we can create a anchor tag over here like this. We can say that the href again is going to be a hashtag over here. However, we can say that this class is going to be navbar brand. Navbar brand. And over here we can just write whatever we want. We're going to say that this is going to be first web page, right? So you can see what happens, how it looks like, right? So it looks as a title of the page, right? So you can see that it's obviously, it still is clickable. However, it just has a little bit nicer appearance. So this is what we can do if we create over here this navbar header with a class of navbar brand. Now there's a couple of things that we can do with our navbar. First of all, what we can do is over here, if we change this navbar default to navbar inverse over here like this, you can see what it happens. It actually becomes black over here, and you can see that as I'm hovering over links, they can become brighter, but that's what we can do actually if we're using navbar inverse. Now, what we also can use is, let's say that we would want it to be fixed top or on the bottom. What we would need to do is actually we would need to say navbar fixed and over here top. And let's say right now, if I would create some, let's say text, I'm just going to say h1. And again, we're just going to say hello world. And we're just going to copy this, I don't know, many times right away, something like this, right? So as we're going to be scrolling up and down, you can see that it's actually staying fixed to the top. Now, obviously, I would need to create some margins for my text and all that, but you understanding the idea how we can actually change over here this class to navbar fixed top, and obviously we could have changed it to navbar fixed bottom. And you can see that right now it's going to be sitting in the bottom. Right, so this is going to be our option. Now I'm going to delete this text so it's actually not messing with our view, and we can just look at a couple of more options that we can have. The nice thing about brackets over here that we can actually create, and let's just get rid of this navbar fixed one, especially in the bottom. But the nice thing about brackets, we can create over here this one more class. We can say navbar, right, over here like this. And what's going to happen is all those classes are actually going to move right? So you can see all my links are actually sitting in the right. Now I could have done it, let's say like this, right? Instead of these ones still sitting on the left, I could have just copied this. Let's say this one, all of this, and let's say copy, and I'm gonna paste it right over here, and I'm just gonna get rid of these links, right? And what I'm gonna do over here, I'm just gonna create a class of, let's say, I don't know, search, right? Search, and here we can create a span of class, let's say glyphicon and glyphicon search. Over here like this, close the span, and hopefully we spelled it correctly, but something is actually showing that it's wrong. You can see I closed it in the wrong place. So now I can see I have my little search icon over here, and what I would want to do is actually give it a little bit more space. So I'm just going to press a spacebar one more time, but here if I would want, I would say navbar, right? So I don't need to move all of them, right? If I would just choose, I can just change one of them. So if I go back, you can see that my search is sitting over here and all my links are sitting right here. So it's very easy to do. Either we add the class to all of my unordered lists, list items over here, if I'm doing it. However, if I would just want one, or let's say two of them, then all I would need to do actually is add a navbar right over here. Now what we also can do is actually add a button, right? So what I'm going to do over here, in between these unordered lists, I'm just going to add a button. And what I'm going to say is I would want a button, and I would want a class over here, and the class is going to be button, and let's say button danger over here like this. And one more class that I would need to actually add is navbar button, and I'll show you why. So over here, if I say button, and again, we're just going to create over here this bigger screen, you can see that if I don't add this class, the problem is that it's actually not lining up correctly. So what I would need to do over here is find where is my classes for my button, and here I would say navbar and button, and now you can see that it's actually be lining up exactly in the middle with the rest of the links. And the same goes if we wanted to add a text. So let's say after the button, we would want to add a text, and we would want to say that this text would have a class over here of navbar text. And exactly the same reasoning again, because otherwise it's not going to be aligning correctly. And here I'm going to say some text, and again we can check it out whether it worked, and you can see some text over here worked beautifully, right? But if I would get rid of this again, this some text, if I would just say, let's say not that text actually, navbar text, if I would mess this class, first of all you can see that they're not going to be appearing more lighter, and you can see that it's actually out of the float, right? So what we would need to do, again, have this navbar text, and then they're actually lining up all beautifully, right? Now let's check it out, what more things we can actually do. And we can actually create this collapse button, because you can see what's happening over here, that I don't like the fact that as I'm going up and down, I don't have this button that I can click, and only then my navbar would be appearing or reappearing. And obviously I would want my button to only show when my screen is smaller, right? So what we would need to do is I'm going to create a new navbar so we can start everything from the fresh and everything is not messing up our view over here. So I'm going to delete this, and over here again I'm just going to delete this, so we have a clear page. And again we're going to start from the beginning because it's a good way of actually remembering everything if we write just a couple of times. So again, it's going to be nav class, and we're going to say navbar, and then we're going to say navbar inverse, right? Because right away we're just going to create a black navbar. And then over here we're just going to create a div, and that div is going to be a class of container over here. And over here we're going to write a div of navbar header. So here we're going to say div, and class is going to be a navbar header. and this is going to be where our navbar brand is going to be. So over here we're just going to create a let's say a anchor tag over here like this. But before we do that, actually let's create a button that would actually going to be our little collapse button, right? So what I would need to write over here, that I would want to create a button, and the button would have a class, and that would be navbar toggle over here like this. And then we would need to add a data toggle attribute also, and we would need to give it a value instead of a drop down. We're going to give it a collapse, right? And after that we're going to say the data target like this would be my navbar. Now it's going to be my navbar because I'm going to be creating ID. So here I'm going to say my navbar, but also I'm going to be creating ID with the same name, right? So over here, if I close it out, now I can see that I created my button, right? But what I would want to do before, I would just actually would want, you can see this is my button over here, but I would want to place something within the button, right? So within the button, we're going to actually create a icon bars, right? So I'm going to say span, and I'm going to say that this is going to have a class. The class is going to be icon bar, right? Something like this. So you can see the first one, right? And what we would need to do over here, let's say in this case 3 times, right? So now we have actually created my button within the header, and what I can do over here is actually add the link what we had before. So over here I'm just going to say href, and first I need to create a link. So this is going to have a hashtag over here, and over here we're going to say class of navbar brand, right? And after that we're going to say this is going to be, let's call it the home page, right? Home page. So now I can see what we did. Within this brand, we had to create this button, and it's just important to remember this is going to have a class of navbar toggle, and data toggle value is going to be collapse, and data target we're just going to be using in this case ID. However, we'll be creating this ID, so it's not like we're just going to be we need to remember it or something. It's pretty much I gave it the name myself, and what's going to happen that as we click it, it's actually our menu is going to be appearing. So it's pretty much like a drop down and collapse that we actually covered it. It's just we're actually placing it over here in this navbar. So over here you can see that this is going to be my container. So what I would need to do right now is actually create this div that would be actually reflecting to this button, right? So I'm just going to keep on going, and I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to say that this is going to have a class, and the class is going to be collapse over here, and navbar collapse over here like this. And then I would need to give it ID. And in this case, I'm just going to give it my navbar over here like this. And then it's pretty much the same thing. We're just going to create a unordered list, and we're going to say that this list is going to have a class of navbar nav. So let's say that I want to create a class nav, and then I'm going to create another class. It's going to be navbar nav. And over here, we're just going to say that this is going to have a list items that would have a link, and we would multiply it 5 times, right? So I just press tab, and this is going to be my navbar nav, right? And obviously we could have written over here a navbar right if we want to, and we could still do that, but we're just going to, in this case, we're just going to keep it the way it is. So I'm just going to add a hashtag, and we're going to get rid of this hashtag. And over here, we're just going to say, I don't know, something like few submenu over here like this. So again, let's just create a little bit of space and see what we did, right? So here the difference was that if we have this header, right? We created this button over here, and the link pretty much stayed the same, right? Link is what we did before, right? We created this navbar brand. This is going to be our homepage. However, we created this button, this one over here, right? And we gave it a data target, this my navbar, which would be over here, this div, right? Which has a class of collapse, navbar collapse, and has the same ID, right? So they're connected with this ID. and this ID has the same on our list that was our submenus. So if I go back over here to the bigger screen, you can see that I have my submenu, but you can see over here that I did a mistake because I wrote over here a container, and that was the reasoning why we want container fluid, right? Because we want them to actually be spanning all the way, right? It kind of makes more sense if they're looking like this instead of when they're a container and then they have their margins, right? So as what happens is that as we're going to the smaller screen, you can see that this button is appearing, and now when I press it, it actually shows right away. And actually, if you have been watching my videos about responsive navbars, or maybe my videos are not the best example. If you've been watching any videos in HTML and CSS, I mean, it is easy to do it, but this definitely is much more easier. And actually, it looks much more nicer right away from the bat, right? When you don't need to actually do any more styling. Now, obviously, you can do styling if you want to. However, like even if you're really lazy, it actually looks really, really well. So this is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.